The grand, obsidian oculus of the high synod chamber did not merely look out upon the stars. It seemed to drink the light of the galaxy, swallowing the brilliance of distant constellations, and leaving only the heavy, suffocating velvet of the void to press against the minds of those who governed. In the center of this monolithic hall, suspended by gravimetric fields that hummed with a sound closer to a vibration in the bone than a noise in the ear, floated the projection of the sanguine reach. It was a sector of space that defied the clean, orderly geometry of the known galaxy, a wound in the cosmos where the stars did not burn white or yellow or blue, but raged in deep, bruised purples and violent, hemorrhaging crimsons. These were the crimson stars, the forbidden dominions where gravity sheared hulls like wet parchment and radiation storms flayed the shielding from dreadnoughts in the span of a single heartbeat. To the Valosian ascendancy, the rulers of the spiral arm, the sanguine reach was a graveyard of gods, a place of holy terror where the laws of physics were rewritten by the madness of ancient, dying suns. High Executor Vrak stood before the projection, his four-fingered hands clasped behind the rigid, ceremonial armor that encased his chitinous torso. The armor was etched with the history of his lineage, scars, and gold filigree telling 1,000 years of conquest. Yet in the red wash of the holographic display, he looked small, insignificant, a fleeting mote of dust against the backdrop of a cosmic storm. The air in the chamber was stale, recycled through filtration systems that had been scrubbing the atmosphere of the synod since the First Dynasty, smelling faintly of ozone and dried spice. Around him, on tiered platforms of basalt and chromium, the other members of the synod sat in shadows, their eyes, compound, multifaceted, glowing with bioluminescence, fixed on the same anomaly that had drawn Vrak from his meditation. They were silent, a silence that was not peaceful but heavy with the static of suppressed fear. Silence was broken by the scuff of metal on stone as Archivist Lorak stepped forward, his robes rustling like dry leaves. He was of the scholar caste, physically smaller, his carapace thinner, but his mind was a repository of the Ascendancy's deepest fears. He gestured with a trembling manipulator toward the center of the crimson swirl in the projection. There, amidst the chaotic data streams that represented gravimetric shear and ionic turbulence, a single, steady point of light persisted. It did not flicker. It did not waver. It moved with a terrifying, linear precision, cutting a straight line through a region of space where space itself was known to buckle and fold. "It has passed the third perimeter," Lorak whispered, his voice clicking in his throat, the translator synthesizing a tone of profound disbelief. "It has traversed the gravity shoals of Keth without altering its vector. It has ignored the radiation geysers of the red giant Proxima. It is not navigating, High Executor. It is ignoring." Vrak felt a cold ripple move through his blood, a sensation he had not felt since the rebellion of the outer systems 3 cycles ago. But that had been a fear of political loss. This was a primal fear, the fear of a predator realizing something larger is moving in the tall grass. "The sensors are calibrated?" Vrak asked, his voice deep, resonating in the cavernous room. "The sanguine reach plays tricks on light and shadow. We have lost scout drones to censor ghosts before." "We have checked the arrays a dozen times," Lorak replied, the tremor in his hands becoming more pronounced. "We have cross-referenced with the listening posts on the edge of the reach. The mass readings are consistent. The energy output is. It is unlike anything in our archives. It is not a ghost executor. It is solid matter, millions of tons of it, moving at sublight crusade speeds directly into the heart of the anomaly." A murmur ran through the synod, a sound like the rustling of insect wings in a hive. One of the fleet marshals, a towering Valosian named Krell whose armor was pitted from skirmishes on the frontier, leaned forward. "If it is a ship, it is a suicide vessel. Nothing survives the inner sphere of the crimson stars. The tidal forces alone will tear it apart before it reaches the core. It is likely a derelict, a hulk thrown from a hyperlane breach, carrying only the dead." "Derelicts do not adjust their shielding harmonics to match the frequency of a pulsar," Lorak countered, his fear momentarily replaced by the defensive pride of a scientist. "Observe the telemetry. At 400 cycles, the vessel encountered a Class 4 solar flare. A standard dreadnought would have raised particle screens. This vessel, it absorbed the impact. It channeled the thermal energy into its own drive plume. It fed on the fire, Marshal. It did not burn." Vrak watched the red dot move. It was slow, agonizingly. Slow compared to the snap travel of warp drives, but its relentless, plodding pace was what unnerved him. It felt inevitable. "Identify the origin," Vrak commanded. "If it is the Krill, they have advanced beyond our estimates. If it is the cyber collectives, we must purge the data networks immediately." Lorok hesitated, looking up at the shadowed tiers of the council. We have analyzed the hull configuration. It matches no known design in the Ascendancy's database. It is blocky, utilitarian, lacking the grace of Valosian aesthetics or the organic curves of the krill. It is brutalist, industrial, and there is a transmission. The chamber went deadly still. A transmission from inside the sanguine reach was impossible. The interference should have turned any signal into white noise. "Play it," Vrak ordered. The room darkened further, and the audio systems crackled. At first, there was only the roaring hiss of cosmic background radiation, the scream of dying stars. Then, cutting through the static like a blade of high-tensile steel, came a voice. It was low, modulated, lacking the clicking intonations of the Valosian tongue or the screeching of the outer species. It was a flat, heavy sound, vibrating with a calmness that felt out of place amidst the chaos of the red stars. "This is the United Terran vessel Indomitable," the voice spoke, translated into the trade tongue of the galaxy. "To any vessels receiving this in the Valosian sector, we are transiting the Crimson Anomaly. Our intent is preservation. Do not interfere. We are heavy and we do not stop." Terran, Vrak tasted the word. It was unfamiliar, archaic. "Who are the Terrans?" "A minor species," Krell scoffed, though his mandibles twitched with unease. "From the Orion Spur, dirt farmers. They barely achieved faster-than-light travel 2 centuries ago. We classified them as Category 4 harmless. They trade in ore and biological samples. They do not build warships that can eat solar flares." "They do now," Vrak murmured. He stared at the red dot. "United Terran vessel Indomitable, the arrogance of such a name. To name a ship cannot be mastered and then fly it into the mouth of hell." He turned to the marshal. "Krell, assemble the Third Armada. We intercept." "Intercept?" Krell blinked, surprised. "Executor, the fleet cannot survive the deep reach. We would be risking the pride of the Navy." "We do not go into the deep reach," Vrak said, his eyes narrowing. "We wait at the exit vector. If they survive the stars, they will emerge weakened, damaged, their shields stripped. And when they do, the Valosian Ascendancy will be there to ask them how a species of dirt farmers learned to walk through fire. And if they do not answer, we will dismantle their Indomitable piece by piece until we find the secret." The mobilization of the Third Armada was a spectacle of military precision that had cowed 100 systems into submission. From the orbital shipyards of Valos Prime, the great cruisers detached from their moorings, their engines igniting like new stars in the darkness. These were beautiful ships, sleek and swept back, shaped like dagger blades and avian wings, covered in pearlescent armor that deflected laser fire and absorbed radar. They moved in perfect formation, a school of deadly silver fish swimming through the black ocean. Thousands of fighters swarmed around the capital ships, and behind them the massive carriers and dreadnoughts, the hammers of the Emperor's will, brought up the rear. It was a force capable of cracking a planet's crust, a force that had maintained the peace, the Valosian peace, for a millennium. Vrak stood on the bridge of the flagship, the Spear of Dawn, watching the fleet assemble. He felt the familiar thrum of power, the assurance of absolute superiority. Yet, as they engaged their warp drives and streaked toward the edge of the sanguine reach, the image of the solitary red dot on the tactical map remained burned into his mind. The humans. He had reviewed the files during the transit. They were physically unimposing, soft skin, no natural armor, internal skeletons that broke under high gravity. They were emotional, prone to chaotic decision-making, fractured into nations and ideologies. Their technology was crude, relying on projectile weapons and combustion long after other races had moved to energy and antimatter. How could such a creature build a ship that defied the crimson stars? The fleet arrived at the edge of the anomaly 3 standard cycles later. The view from the bridge was apocalyptic. The sanguine reach dominated the forward viewports, a swirling nebula of blood-red gas and violent violet lightning. The stars within were bloated, pulsating giants that seemed to be in the throes of a violent death. The radiation alarms on the Spear of Dawn began to chirp softly, a warning that even at this distance, the reach was lethal. "Deploy the blockade," Krell ordered from the tactical pit. "Sphere formation if T. Hey, emerge, they will be entering a kill box." The armada spread out, a net of steel and energy cast wide across the darkness. And then they waited. The waiting was the hardest part. In the vacuum, time seemed to stretch. The sensors monitored the edge of the nebula, watching for the disturbance that would signal a ship emerging from warp. But the human ship was not in warp. It was moving at sublight speeds, trudging through the sludge of reality. Hours turned into days. The crew of the Valosian fleet grew restless. Whispers began to circulate that it was a ghost ship, that the executor was chasing phantoms, that the humans were already dead, crushed by the gravity of the inner stars. Target contact? The shout from the sensor officer shattered the calm on the bridge. Sector 4 Alpha, emerging from the nebula particulate cloud. Vrak leaned forward, gripping the railing. On screen, magnify. The main view screen flickered, the interference from the nebula clearing as the image resolved. And then, silence fell over the bridge of the Spear of Dawn. They had expected a wreck. They had expected a ship pitted and scarred, leaking atmosphere, its engines sputtering, perhaps dragging itself out of the dark on emergency power. What emerged from the clouds of red gas was a mountain. The Indomitable was not sleek. It possessed no aerodynamic curves, for there was no air in space to streamline against. It was a massive, brutal block of dark gray alloy, a rectangular slab of geometry that offended the Valosian sense of aesthetics. It was colossal, easily 3 times the mass of Vrak's flagship. Its hull was not smooth, but covered in thick, layered plating that looked like the scales of some subterranean beast, interlocking and ablative. There were no visible windows, no glowing weak points, just banks of thrusters and sensor arrays buried deep within armored trenches. And it was undamaged. The red dust of the nebula clung to it in patches, but the hull beneath was pristine. There were no scorch marks. The radiation shielding, which should have been glowing white-hot, was cool and stable. The ship moved with a terrified silence, its massive engines emitting a low, blue ion trail that looked less like propulsion and more like a tear in the universe. "Scan them," Vrak whispered, his voice dry. "I want to know what that hull is made of. I want to know their weapon status." "Scanning," the sensor officer replied, his voice rising in panic. "Executor, the sensors are—" "They are sliding off. The ship has an active dampening field. It is absorbing our active pings. I can't get a lock on their internal reactor." "They are hailing us," the communications officer said. "Audio only, wideband." "Put it through." The same voice from before filled the bridge, calm, heavy, unimpressed. "Valosian fleet, this is Captain Aris Thorne of the Indomitable. You are blocking our trajectory. We are on a humanitarian intervention vector. Adjust your formation to allow passage, or we will move through you." Krell bristled, his mandibles flaring. "They threaten us, a single ship against an armada." He looked to Vrak. "Permission to fire warning shots across their bow." Vrak calculated. The human ship was large, yes, but it was alone, and it was arrogant. Arrogance had to be answered. "Permission granted. Fire a plasma torpedo volley. Proximity detonation. Rattle their teeth. Let them know who owns this space." 3 Valosian destroyers broke formation, their weapon ports glowing green. They launched a salvo of plasma torpedoes, streaking toward the human vessel like angry hornets. The bridge crew watched, expecting the human ship to veer, to raise shields, to deploy countermeasures. The Indomitable did not change course. It did not even roll. The torpedoes detonated 500 meters off the port bow of the human ship, a blinding flash of green fire that washed over the gray hull. When the light faded, the ship was still there. It hadn't even slowed down. Did they absorb the blast?" Krell asked, stunned. "No, sir," the sensor officer said. "They ignored it. Their hull integrity remained at 100%. The energy splash didn't even penetrate their outer navigation deflectors." The voice returned, sounding slightly more weary, like a parent addressing a petulant child. "Valosian fleet, we do not have time for posturing. We are responding to a planetary distress signal from the colony on Cygnus V. Their star is entering a destabilization phase initiated by the Crimson Tide. We are going to stabilize it. Move." "Stabilize a star?" Vrak laughed, a harsh barking sound. "They are insane. No one stabilizes a star. The Crimson Tide is the will of the cosmos. It is entropy. It is the end of things." "It is an engineering problem," the human captain replied. The sheer audacity of the statement struck Vrak like a physical blow. An engineering problem. The death of a son, the end of a world, reduced to a calculation to be solved. "All S. Hips," Vrak roared, his pride overriding his caution. "Weapons free, target their engines, disable that vessel. They violate the sanctity of the Reach and they mock the ascendancy." The sky lit up. The Valosian armada unleashed hell. Laser batteries, plasma cannons, antimatter missiles, thousands of points of light converged on the Indomitable. It was enough firepower to turn a moon into dust. The bridge of the Spear of Dawn shook with the recoil of its own main guns. For a full minute, the human ship was lost in a storm of explosions. Vrak watched with grim satisfaction. No material in the universe could withstand that. The humans were dust. But as the smoke cleared, the sensor officer let out a sound of pure horror. Energy spike. Massive energy spike detected from the target. The smoke was blown away not by wind, but by light. A field of golden energy had erupted around the Indomitable. It wasn't a wall, it was a lattice, a honeycomb of hard light geometry that spun and shifted. The Valosian weapon's fire wasn't bouncing off. It was being caught, trapped in the hexagonal cells of the shield, and then digested. The golden light pulsed, and the human ship seemed to inhale. They are feeding on our weapon fire, the sensor officer screamed. Their reactor output just jumped 400%. They are using our energy to charge their capacitors. Cease fire, Vrak yelled. Cease fire. But it was too late. The Indomitable had finished charging. We told you, the human voice came back, cold and hard as iron. We are heavy. From the prow of the human ship, no laser fired. No missile launched. Instead, a wave of pressure, pure kinetic force, erupted. It was a gravity pulse, a localized distortion of space-time. It hit the Valosian fleet like a tsunami hitting a row of paper boats. Vrak was thrown from his command chair. The artificial gravity on the Spear of Dawn failed, then reversed, then stabilized. Alarms screamed from every console. On the view screen, he saw the Armada in chaos. Destroyers were spinning uncontrollably. Cruisers were pushed aside, their formations shattered, drifting helplessly as their engines fought against the artificial gravity shear. The Indomitable did not stop to finish them off. It did not fire a single killing shot. It simply continued on its path, pushing the debris of the Valosian pride out of its way with the indifference of a whale swimming through plankton. Vrak pulled himself up, bleeding from a cut on his forehead. He looked at the retreating engine lights of the human ship. They weren't fighting a war. They were clearing a blockage in the road. Get me a channel to that ship, Vrak wheezed. Do not fire, I want to talk to the captain. Sir, the fleet is in disarray. We have multiple collisions, Krell reported, nursing a broken arm. Ignore the fleet, Vrak snapped. That ship is going to Cygnus V. It intends to stop a star from dying. If they can do that, if they possess the power to rewrite the life cycle of a star, then the ascendancy is nothing. We are children playing with sticks. I must see this. He ordered the Spear of Dawn to pursue, not to attack, but to follow. The flagship, battered but functional, limped after the human juggernaut, trailing it into the deeper dark of the Cygnus system. The journey to Cygnus V was a silent testament to the power of the Terran vessel. As they moved deeper into the influence of the unstable star, the radiation storms became violent. The Spear of Dawn shook and rattled, its shields dropping to critical levels. The crew was terrified, huddled at their stations. Yet ahead of them, the Indomitable acted as a shield. The human ship projected a wake, a cone of safety behind it, cutting through the radiation and leaving a calm channel for the Valosian ship to follow. Vrak realized with a sinking feeling that the humans were protecting them. They knew the Valosian ship was following, and instead of destroying it or leaving it to burn in the radiation, they had extended their screen. It was a humiliation worse than defeat. It was pity. When they arrived at Cygnus V, the sight was horrifying. The red giant star was bloating, its surface roiling with angry solar flares that licked at the orbit of the small, habitable moon where the colony lay. The colony was Valosian, a mining outpost, long abandoned by the central government because the cost of evacuation was deemed higher than the value of the ore. The ascendancy had left them to die, citing the red logic of the stars. They are down there, Lorok whispered, looking at the sensor data. 3,000 miners, families, they are praying for the end. The Indomitable moved into a high synchronous orbit between the star and the moon. It was a speck against the angry red sun, but a speck that cast a long shadow. What are they doing? Vrak asked. They are deploying structures, the sensor officer said. From the belly of the human warship, massive pylons were ejected. They didn't drift. They flew under their own power, positioning themselves in a vast ring around the equator of the ship. Beams of blue light connected them, forming a lens the size of a continent. Captain Thorne, Vrak spoke into the comms, his voice humble for the first time in centuries. This is High Executor Vrak. What are you attempting? The star's mass ejection is imminent. You cannot stop a solar flare with a shield. The screen flickered, and for the first time, Vrack saw the face of the human. Captain Thorne was older than he expected, with gray hair and skin that looked like worn leather. He wore a simple uniform, blue and gray, with no medals, only a small patch on his shoulder that depicted a green leaf growing from a stone. He sat in a chair that looked functional, surrounded by crew members who were working with quiet, intense focus. "Executor Vrack," Thorne nodded, acknowledging him. "We aren't trying to block the flare, we're going to bleed it." "Bleed it?" "The star is choking on its own fusion byproducts," Thorne explained, as if lecturing a student. "The core pressure is too high, it's about to vomit its outer layers. We are going to drill a magnetic tap into the photosphere and vent the excess plasma into subspace. We're performing emergency surgery." "That is impossible," Lorak gasped. "The energy required to puncture the photosphere. You would need the power output of a binary system." Thorne cracked a rare, slight smile. "Or one singularity drive, watch." The Indomitable began to hum. The sound was transmitted through the comms, a rising crescendo that vibrated the deck plates of the Valosian ship miles away. The great lens formed by the pylons began to glow with a light that was not on the visible spectrum, a color that hurt the Valosian eyes to look at. "Firing main injector," Thorne said. A beam of pure white light erupted from the Indomitable, struck the lens, was magnified 1,000-fold, and lanced out toward the red sun. It was a needle of god light, piercing the gloom of the system. It struck the surface of the sun. The star screamed. It was not a sound in air, but a scream across the electromagnetic spectrum. The sensors on the Spear of Dawn went blind. Gravity waves rippled outward, rocking the ships. Vrack watched the view screen, his heart hammering against his ribs. On the surface of the sun, a vortex opened. The white beam had punched a hole in the magnetic containment of the star. And then a stream of angry, red plasma, a river of fire 1,000 miles wide, erupted from the hole, not outward toward the moon, but upward, following the beam, channeled into the lens, and then shunted into nowhere. "They are venting it into subspace," Lorak breathed, his mind struggling to comprehend the physics. "They are draining the infection." For 6 hours, the Indomitable held the beam. The ship shuddered. Vrack could see small explosions on the human hull, couplers blowing, heat sinks failing, but the beam never wavered. The humans were taking the punishment, holding the door open while the star vomited its rage. Slowly, visibly, the red giant calmed. The violent roiling of the surface smoothed. The color shifted from an angry, bruised purple to a stable, dull crimson. The immediate threat of the nova was gone. The beam cut off. The pylons retracted. The Indomitable drifted, its hull glowing dull red from the heat it had absorbed. "Status?" Vrack asked. "The star is stable," Lorak said, his voice reverent. "They bought the system another 10,000 years." Vrack slumped in his chair. He looked at the human ship, now scarring and blackened, but still unbroken. He felt a strange emotion, one the Valosian warrior caste was not supposed to feel: shame and awe. "Open a channel," Vrack said. Thorne appeared on the screen again. He looked tired. He was wiping grease from his hands with a rag. "You saved them," Vrack said. "The miners, my people, the ones we abandoned." "We saved the system," Thorne corrected gently. "Life is rare, Executor. We don't like to see it burn out." "Why?" Vrack asked. "We attacked you. We threatened you. We are not your allies. Why risk your ship for a species that would have destroyed you?" Thorne leaned back. "Because we were you once," he said. "Long ago, we fought, we conquered. We left the weak to die because we thought strength was all that mattered. We almost killed our own planet. We learned the hard way that the universe is dark and cold and doesn't care about us. The only warmth there is the warmth we make for each other. That's the Terran burden, Executor. We build the fire, we hold back the dark." Vrack looked at his own hands, the claws of a predator. He looked at the human, the soft-skinned engineer. "We call the sanguine reach the domain of death. You treat it like a broken machine." "It is a machine," Thorne said. The statement hung in the air. "What?" "The crimson stars," Thorne said, his voice dropping an octave. Becoming serious again. "They aren't natural, Executor. Stars don't cluster like this. They don't die in sync. We didn't just come here to save one colony. We came to check the readings." Thorne tapped a console, and a new data packet was sent to the Spear of Dawn. Lorak opened it, and his eyes widened to their limit. This is a map," Lorak said. "A map of the Sanguine Reach." "It's a containment grid," Thorne explained. "Ancient, Millions of years old, someone moved these stars here. Someone arranged them to create a gravity well so deep that nothing could escape it. The radiation, the instability, it's the waste heat of a prison. Vrak felt the floor drop out from under him. A prison for what? We don't know yet, Thorn said. But the grid is failing. That's why the stars are flaring. That's why the crimson tide is happening. The bars of the cage are breaking. The human captain looked directly into the camera, his eyes piercing the distance between the ships. The Indomitable isn't just a rescue ship, Executor. We are the first of the repair crew. But we can't do it alone. The grid is too big. We need materials. We need logistics. We need a fleet that knows this sector. Thorn paused. We need the Valosian ascendancy, not as conquerors, but as custodians. Vrak stood. The political ramifications were immense. The Synod would argue. The warrior castes would rebel. To work with aliens, to admit the holy stars were just a failing machine, it would destroy their religion. It would shatter their worldview. But Vrak looked at the stable sun. He looked at the moon where 3,000 of his people were still alive because of these humans. He looked at the Indomitable, a ship that had defied the anger of a star. He realized that the red logic was a lie. Survival wasn't about being the strongest predator. It was about being the best builder. The Synod will not understand, Vrak said slowly. Then explain it to them, Thorn said. Or bring them here, show them the sun. Vrak nodded. He placed his hand over his chest, a gesture of respect he had only ever offered to the Emperor. I will bring them, Vrak said, and Captain Thorn. Yes. My ship has taken damage. Our reactor shielding is compromised. We cannot make the return trip through the radiation belt without assistance. Thorn smiled. It was a genuine, warm smile. Form up on our starboard quarter, Spear of Dawn. We'll extend the field. We'll walk you home. As the two ships turned, one sleek and silver, broken and humbled, the other blocky and gray, scarred but triumphant, Vrak looked out at the sanguine reach. It no longer looked like a place of holy terror. It looked like a job site, a vast, terrifying, magnificent project. The journey back to the perimeter was slow. This time, however, there was no tension on the bridge of the Spear of Dawn. There was a studious silence. Vrak watched the humans work. He saw how they adjusted their shields microsecond by microsecond to account for the chaotic eddies of the nebula. He saw the logic in their brutalist design. It wasn't lack of art. It was an aesthetic of pure function, a beauty born of endurance. They did not try to flow with the universe like the Valosians. They planted their feet and told the universe to flow around them. When they emerged from the red clouds of the nebula, the rest of the Valosian armada was waiting. They had regrouped, expecting to see debris or perhaps the human ship fleeing. Instead, they saw their own flagship, flanked by the gray giant, emerging from the smoke like knights returning from a dragon's lair. Vrak opened a fleet-wide channel. This is High Executor Vrak, he announced. Stand down all weapons systems. The Terran vessel is under my personal protection. Any ship that locks targeting scanners on the Indomitable will be fired upon by the Spear of Dawn. The confusion in the fleet was palpable, but the discipline held. The weapons powered down. Vrak turned to Lorok. Prepare the data. We are going back to Valos Prime. We are going to tear down the Synod's understanding of the universe, and we are going to build something new. And the humans? Lorok asked. They are staying, Vrak said, watching the Indomitable turn back toward the dark heart of the Reach. They say they have work to do. They are going to fix the stars. As the Valosian fleet prepared for warp, Vrak took one last look at the human ship. It was already moving away, plunging back into the hell that terrified the galaxy. It was a singular point of defiance against the entropy of the cosmos. The philosophical weight of the moment settled on him. The ascendancy believed that chaos was the natural state, and order was a fleeting illusion. The humans believed the opposite. They believed that chaos was a mess to be cleaned up. They were the janitors of the void, armed with gravity hammers and sun lances. And they were right. Executor, the comms officer said, we are receiving a final ping from the human ship. It is a text file, low bandwidth. Read it. It says the universe is a garden. Sometimes you have to prune the thorns. See you in the spring. Vrak let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. The spring, a concept of renewal. In the sanguine Reach there had never been a spring, only an eternal dying autumn. But now. Course set for Valos Prime, the helmsman called out. Engage, Vrak ordered. The stars stretched into lines of light, and the Valosian fleet vanished into the fold of space. Behind them, in the deep red dark, the Indomitable burned its engines, a lonely torch in the night, heading toward the next dying star, ready to hold back the dark for one more day. The transition of the Valosian society was not instantaneous, nor was it bloodless. Ideas, Vrak found, were harder to kill than soldiers. When the Spear of Dawn returned to the homeworld, the Synod was in an uproar. The footage of the Indomitable stabilizing the star was dismissed by the religious caste as a trick, a hologram, a heresy. They claimed Vrak had been mind-altered by the aliens. There were riots in the lower districts. The cult of the Red Logic preached that denying the death of the star was an insult to the cycle of time. But Vrak had something the priests did not. He had the miners. A week after the return, a transport ship arrived from Cygnus V. It carried the 3,000 Valosian citizens who had been slated for death. They disembarked not as refugees, but as witnesses. They told stories of the sky turning white with human fire, of the ground shaking as the gravity of the moon was artificially reinforced by the Terran ship to prevent tidal quakes. They brought data pads filled with schematics given to them by the human engineers, plans for geothermal tap converters, atmospheric scrubbers, things that could turn a mining colony into a paradise. The testimony of 3,000 living ghosts broke the back of the opposition. The Red Logic could not argue with the fact that the dead were walking and breathing. Vrak seized the moment. He called for a grand conclave, inviting not just the High Synod, but the fleet commanders, the leaders of the merchant guilds, and the scientific directorates. In the Great Hall, Vrak projected the map the humans had given him, the map of the prison. "We have worshipped a cage," Vrak told the assembly, his voice amplified to reach the millions watching via the planetary grid. "We looked at the bars of a cell and called them holy. We feared the prisoner, though we did not know he existed. The humans have shown us the lock, and they are offering us the key." "And what is inside?" a priest shouted from the crowd. "If the sanguine reaches a prison, what is it holding? If the humans break the grid, do they release the monster?" Vrak paused. It was the question that had haunted him since the revelation. "We do not know," he admitted. "But consider this, the grid is failing on its own. The stars are dying. If we do nothing, the cage breaks anyway, and we are unprepared. If we work with the Terrans, we reinforce the bars, or we open the door on our own terms." The debate raged for cycles, but slowly the pragmatic nature of the Valosian people took over. They were at their core survivors, and the humans offered a better chance of survival. A diplomatic envoy was dispatched. Not a war fleet, but a coalition of science vessels and heavy industrial haulers, escorted by Vrak's loyal squadrons. They returned to the edge of the Sanguine Reach, not to fight, but to learn. The meeting point was a Lagrange point between two stable red dwarfs deep within the sector. The humans had established a forward operating base there. It wasn't a military fortress. It was a construction yard. When Vrak's shuttle approached the station, he saw not just the Indomitable, but 3 other Terran ships. They were all massive, all blocky, all radiating that sense of immense, restrained power. One was visibly a carrier, its hangars open, spewing swarms of construction drones that looked like silver bees repairing a hive. Captain Thorne met Vrak on the observation deck of the station. The human looked even more tired than before, dark circles under his eyes, but his grip was firm when they shook hands. A custom Vrak had practiced until he could perform it without crushing the human's bones. "We found the center," Thorne said without preamble. He gestured out the viewport. In the distance, magnified by the station's sensors, was a point of absolute darkness. It wasn't a black hole. It was something else. A void where starlight simply ceased to exist. Around it, the crimson stars danced in a complex, terrifying orbital ballet, their gravity weaving a net to keep the darkness contained. "What is it?" Vrak asked. "It's a tear," Thorne said. "A rupture in the fabric of this dimension, leading to somewhere else. Somewhere with different laws of physics. Entropy runs backward there, or sideways. The ancients who built this grid used the stars as gravity anchors to pinch the hole shut. But the stars are running out of fuel." "So we refuel them?" Vrak asked. "We replace them," Thorne corrected. "We can't keep red giants alive forever. We need to build artificial gravity wells, singularities. We need to build a ring of black holes around that tier, controlled, stable." Vrak stared at the human. The scale of the engineering was beyond comprehension. To build a black hole, the energy required. "We have the technology," Thorn said. "We have the designs, we don't have the mass, we need raw material, billions of tons of ultradense heavy metals, osmium, neutronium, we need to strip mine dead moons, and we need to do it fast. The tier is widening if it opens. The laws of physics in this sector unravel. The sanguine reach expands until it consumes the arm." Vrak understood then why the humans had come. They weren't just saving a colony. They were saving the galaxy, and they had done it quietly, stoically, without asking for recognition or payment. "The Ascendancy has mining fleets," Vrak said, his mind racing with logistics. "We have immense stockpiles of heavy ore. We have the labor force." "We know," Thorn said. "That's why we didn't shoot you." The alliance was born in the shadow of the tier. It was an alliance of necessity, but it forged a bond stronger than any treaty. For the next 5 years, the Sanguine Reach became the busiest sector in the galaxy. Valosian haulers, shielded by Terran gravity fields, moved mountains of ore. Human engineers worked side by side with Valosian scientists, teaching them the math of hypergeometry. They built the ring. It was a necklace of 8 artificial singularities, suspended in a magnetic web rotating around the tier. Vrak watched the construction from the bridge of the Indomitable. He spent more time on the human ship than his own. He had grown to appreciate their culture. He saw how they interacted, not with the rigid hierarchy of the Valosians, but with a fluid, chaotic efficiency. They argued, they debated, they listened to music that sounded like crashing metal, they ate food that smelled of strange spices. But when the alarms rang, they moved as one organism. The day of the activation arrived. The Crimson Stars, the old Sentinels, were failing. 2 of them had already gone supernova, their explosions contained by the Terran shields. The ring had to take the load. "Synchronization in T-10 minutes, Thorn's voice echoed through the fleet. "All Valosian vessels pull back to the outer perimeter. If this goes wrong, the gravity shear will turn you into spaghetti." "We are holding position," Vrak replied from the comms station on the Indomitable. He had resigned his commission as High Executor to oversee the project personally. He was just Vrak now. "If this ship falls, I fall with it." Thorn glanced at him and nodded. "Suit yourself, inertial dampeners to maximum." The sequence began. The 8 artificial singularities were spun up. The energy readings spiked off the charts. Space twisted. Light bent into pretzels. The viewports showed the stars smearing into streaks. "Transferring the load," the operations officer called out. "Disconnecting the stellar anchors, engaging the ring." For a moment, the universe screamed again. The tier in reality thrashed, a beast fighting its leash. The Indomitable groaned, the hull screaming under the stress. Vrak felt his weight double, then triple. He was pressed into his chair, his vision graying out. "Hold it together," Thorn gritted out, his hands flying across his console. "Balance the harmonics on Singularity 4, it's wobbling." "Compensating." The shaking reached a crescendo, rattling teeth and breaking glass. And then, stillness. The crushing weight vanished. The hum of the engines smoothed out. Vrak looked at the main screen. The angry, chaotic swirl of the Sanguine Reach was gone. In its place was a perfect, silent circle of blackness, ringed by 8 points of blue-white light, the accretion disks of the artificial black holes. The tier was sealed. The wound was cauterized. The Crimson Stars, relieved of their burden, drifted away. Old soldiers finally allowed to rest. "Stable," the sensor officer whispered. "Variance is 0.0, it's a perfect seal." Cheering erupted on the bridge. Humans hugged each other. Some wept. Vrak found himself clapping his hands, a human gesture he had picked up. Thorn slumped in his chair, exhaling a long plume of breath. "Good work, everyone, good work." He turned to Vrak. "Well, Vrak, we did it. The galaxy is safe." "For now," Vrak said. "But the tier. What is on the other side? We sealed it, but we did not explore it." Thorn's face darkened. "We explored it before we sealed it. We sent a probe through." "And?" Thorn tapped a command. "This is classified, eyes only, but you des. To see it." A video file opened on Vrak's console. It showed the view from the probe as it passed through the tier. The laws of physics inverted. Colors became sounds. Time ran in loops. And then the probe broke through into a void. It was a dead universe, a place where all the stars had burned out eons ago, nothing but cold ash and iron. But in the center of that dead universe, drifting in the dark, was a signal, a repeating broadcast. "Translate it," Vrak whispered. We did, Thorn said. It's a warning. It's from the people who built the grid, the ones who locked this door from our side. The translation scrolled across the screen. Do not enter. We have consumed everything here. The hunger remains. We are sleeping to conserve energy. Do not wake US. Vrak felt a chill that had nothing to do with space. They ate their own universe. And they were waiting for the door to open so they could eat ours, Thorn said. That's why the grid was built, not to keep us out, to keep them in. Vrak looked at the perfect circle of the ring on the screen. The humans hadn't just fixed a natural disaster. They had reinforced the gates of hell. You knew, Vrak said. You knew what was in there. We suspected, Thorn said. Humanity has a long history of stories about monsters in the dark. We tend to take them seriously. So what now? Vrak asked. The door is locked. The key is thrown away. Now, Thorn stood up, stretching his back. Now we go home, we repair the ships, we rest. He looked at Vrak with a gleam in his eye. And then we build a bigger fleet, because locks don't last forever, Vrak. Someday that ring will fail, maybe in 1,000,000 years, maybe in 10, and when it does, when those things wake up. We need to be ready, not just Terrans, not just Valosians, all of us. Vrak looked at the human captain. He saw the fatigue, but beneath it, the unyielding iron of their spirit. He realized then why the ship was named Indomitable. It wasn't a boast, it was a promise. A bigger fleet, Vrak mused. The Synod will complain about the budget. Thorn laughed. Let them complain, we'll send them the bill. I will help you build it, Vrak said. The Valosian ascendancy will stand with Terra. I was counting on it, Thorn said. The Indomitable turned away from the ring, its engines flaring blue. Flanked by the Valosian escorts, it headed back toward the starlight of the living galaxy. Behind them, the silent sentinels of the ring stood guard over the nightmare, watching, waiting, defying the dark. And in the silence of the void, Vrak realized that the universe was indeed a garden, full of thorns and rot. But as long as there were gardeners like these, willing to bleed to keep the flowers growing, there was hope. The red logic was dead. Long live the logic of the shield. The end.